You're listening to On the Point, the News Collective's weekly news report, formerly known as Democracy Watch, bringing you alternative and undercovered current affairs coverage from Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. I'm Isa Yu.
I'm Akshay Kulkarni.
I'm Violet Miles.
I'm Zachary Tharp.
I'm Zubin Shroff Mehrabadi.
I'm Joshua Azizi.
It's Thursday, January 30th at 5:05 p.m. We're broadcasting from UBC's Vancouver campus on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people.
We have a packed show for you guys today. We're going to be talking about last Sunday's protest at the Indian Consulate and the climate crisis and the outbreak of the infamous coronavirus. We'll also be premiering an experimental nonfiction piece by Alex DeBoer, so definitely stay tuned for that. But before any of that, we're going to have an update on the ride-hailing situation. The days since Uber and Lyft launch were far from smooth in Vancouver, and that's going to be from Alex Trabolsi with the News Collective, who created a brief roundup for the complications the ride-hailing companies have faced since launching.
A lot has happened in the week since Uber and Lyft were approved to operate in Vancouver. Here's a quick rundown. The Passenger Transportation Board, an independent tribunal responsible for issuing operating licenses to taxi companies and companies like Uber and Lyft, approved for Uber and Lyft to operate in the Lower Mainland and Whistler, but both companies need to obtain business licenses from the municipalities. The day Uber and Lyft launch, the 24th of January 2020, Uber decided it would service the entirety of Metro Vancouver, while Lyft decided to only serve the city of Vancouver. Vancouver is the only city where they have business licenses, but Uber said that in spite of this, they will continue to operate across Metro Vancouver. Over the weekend, Surrey bylaw officers were instructed to crack down on Uber drivers operating in the city without a license, issuing warnings to the drivers and $500 fines to Uber itself. On the 27th of January, Surrey's mayor, Doug McCallum, doubled down on opposition to Uber, saying the company was operating illegally in the city. A lot of important events occurred on the 28th of January. In an escalation from the weekend, the mayor of Surrey threatened to order bylaw officers to directly fine Uber drivers who are operating in the city. Later in the day, Uber had also filed an injunction of its own against Surrey to stop the city from issuing fines against drivers. Taxi companies, along with threatening to stop subsidizing accessible vehicles, filed an injunction in the BC Supreme Court to strip Uber and Lyft of their business licenses. If the judge grants the injunction, it means that ride-hailing companies could be ordered off the road as soon as the 4th of February. Later in the day, Uber also filed an injunction of its own against Surrey to stop the city from issuing fines against drivers. While on paper, the provincial government has power over cities through the Community Charter, a provincial law governing cities such as Surrey, the government has not indicated a wish to intervene in the dispute between Uber and Surrey this early on. For now, the dispute will continue to play out in the courts, alongside the taxi company's appeal of the Passenger Transportation Board's ruling that allowed Uber and Lyft to enter BC in the first place. Even though the government opened the provincial barriers to ride-hailing companies by amending legislation in late 2018, it is beginning to look as though there are still plenty of hurdles to cross before full service can come to BC.
You're listening to On the Point by CITR News. We'll be back after a short ad break.
FundDrive 2020, CITR's annual fundraiser extravaganza, is almost upon us. This year's theme is Crush on CITR. We deal primarily in sound around here. We started wondering, what does a crush sound like?
Okay, I think. Is that? Yeah.
Ding.
Hey, do you want to make out? It's like that filter on Instagram. It's like da-da-da.
Well, as great as those answers were, we're kind of hoping this year a crush sounds a bit more like... Because your donations are what allow us to do, well, almost everything. Hosting free radio and podcast trainings, publishing the amazing Discorder magazine, producing local independent news, promoting and playing local music, and so much more. Our fund drive goal is to reach $30,000 by February 14th. You can show your crush on CITR right now by visiting citr.ca/donate.
Feeling lost in the lonely, meaningless cyberweb? Looking to connect with other users? Then plug in to a CITR collective. Meet users who are compatible with your interests and passions. CITR's mainframe offers 9 unique collectives: news, arts, accessibility, sports, persons of color, indigenous, gender empowerment, LGBTQ2SIA+, and music affairs. CITR collectives are where you can make great radio, great friends, and avoid the abject loneliness of life in the cyber void. Loneliness.
Welcome back to On the Point on CITR 101.9 FM. We're just starting out the show, and we heard an update on Vancouver's newly activated ride-hailing apps. And we have much more local content for you ahead.
That's right. So we all know how multicultural and diverse Vancouver is. It's not surprising that it's often been at the center of many events with global consequences. Last week, we heard about why the protest was going ahead, and it occurred on Sunday, and now we have Akshay to tell us more about his piece from there.
Hello, yeah. So I mentioned last week about why Indians were protesting against the government on Sunday, which was Republic Day last time. And, not too many people were talking about it. And a big question was sort of on my mind, which was how effective would these protests, so far removed from India be? Because no one in Canada seems to care. And that just sort of got me wondering about the complicated situation India is in with these protests all around the world.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, this information was all news to us last week. So why do you think that is?
Well, it's just sort of complicated to explain exactly how India became this way. Because, in the Western eye, India is known as a big melting pot, colorful, diverse, a huge amount of people. So to hear it sort of tearing itself apart is news to everyone. And I kind of think that's because Hindu nationalism, which is the main driving force between all of the things that people are protesting about, are sort of complicated to understand. So I know I went to the protest, but I sort of ended up using this piece to try to explain Hindu nationalism, try to explain India's situation. And I know there are a lot of nuances that I will be missing inevitably, but I talked to my mom for this, so if that doesn't get you interested, I don't know what is. So I hope people start listening to us, to India, just about the things that's going on.
So Akshay and fellow UBC journalism student Josh Azizi went to the protest. Here's Akshay's story.
The big breaking story, we're tracking violence inside Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University. Violence which the Delhi police claims is now over, they say, for the moment.
The students were basically protesting peacefully, more or less. And then the government used the state machinery, the police, to just brutally attack them.
Despite the considerable violence on campus and the fact that there has been a great deal of destruction of property and students and faculty members being injured, not a single arrest has taken place yet.
A new India, a new normal. Today, NDTV's Ratnadeep Chaudhary reports from this massive center. It's India's first detention center, which will house lakhs of people who will be declared stateless after various appeals.
My name is Akshay Kulkarni. I'm 21. I grew up in the southern part of India, in a city called Bengaluru. I studied journalism in Canada, at UBC. While I do reporting on local issues, lately, it's been hard to me to tear my attention away from my home, India. A lot of Canadians don't know what's going on in India right now. As an Indian living in Canada, I do. The unrest there is kind of unbelievable. In the last 3 months, hundreds of people have been seriously injured in protests. Almost 190,000 people have been rendered stateless under new citizenship laws. And all of this in addition to a communication blackout in the Muslim-majority state of Kashmir for almost half a year. The root of this unrest is Islamophobia and Hindu nationalism. It's always been present in India, but lately it's been growing.
So can you tell us a little bit about why you're here?
Well, so I have been a Jamia alumnus. That was the university where the students were beaten up when they were protesting against this amendment act that the government passed on, I think, 12th of December. And so the students were basically protesting peacefully, more or less. And then the government used the state machinery, the police, to just brutally attack them. And that concerned me because universities are supposed to be a safe environment where we can ask questions and not just seek answers. And so that's what actually got me in here. And yeah.
You said you were an alumna of this university?
I was an alumna of that university, yes.
That
was personal. But I graduated in 2014, so that was quite long back, yeah.
Do you still have like a lot of friends who go there, or?
Definitely. I mean, I did my master's there, so I still have my my profs there, right? So.
Last Sunday, January the 26th, I and fellow UBC journalism student Joshua Azizi went to a protest against the Indian government held in downtown Vancouver. To make a complicated story simple, Narendra Modi is the Prime Minister of India. He runs India's government with his Hindu majority party, the BJP. Hinduism is the dominant religion in India, and it's become a core of Indian nationalism. Modi recently passed policies that prevent Muslim refugees from gaining Indian citizenship, and this has stoked existing animosity between Hindus and Muslims in the country. Growing up in India, especially when terrorist attacks like the Mumbai attacks in 2008 happened, I noticed the media and institutions playing into anti-Muslim narratives. History lessons I had in elementary and high school often mentioned religion exclusively in contexts of conflict and war. Like it seemed like today's situation was inevitable. Now that I'm older and I have access to more perspectives outside of the Indian classroom, I'm struck by how badly other religions were portrayed to me when I was young. And I started thinking about how far this might have gone back. Was my mother, for example, taught the same anti-Muslim rhetoric I was taught?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, okay, let me just check this is recording correctly. That's my mom, Sujata MK. She's in her mid-50s and grew up in Mysore, a part of India next to Bangalore with a sizable Muslim minority. Some of her best friends are Muslims, and she thinks Modi's tactics are crazy. Thinking back though, she and I remembered some ways in which they are negatively spoken about in India.
Till you point out the religion, it's not there in people's minds at all. They're just bringing it up to create more division, I feel.
And is that like something that, like a sort of education, like you talked about the media before, is that like something that comes through those channels as well? Like in your experience, has that been true? I was thinking of a personal example of mine was, I remember when we were learning about like Muhammad Ghori, who's the guy who killed Prithviraj Chauhan, way back when. He was always portrayed as a sort of invader. And like Babur, of course, was portrayed as an invader. But the sort of truth is, which like the textbooks fail to mention, is that like there have been a lot of Muslims and like Turks and Afghans in India even before then. But they don't ever mention that. So like that sort of stuff. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like the anti sort of, not anti-Muslims specifically, but sort of implying Hindus were here before, implying Hindus were always here, that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got it.
Can you think of like some more stuff like that?
I don't know whether it's connected, but one thing that comes to mind is when we go to these temples and all, like where the destroyed the idols and all, like everybody, the guide, everyone mentions that Muslims did this. like that, right?
Yeah.
So there the assumption is that the temples were there and the Muslims came and did this kind of.
The trope of a foreigner being an invader and of those foreigners desecrating places of worship is a common one in many nationalist narratives around the world. It makes sense that the same tired rhetoric was taught to me and my family about Muslims in India. When a country is ruled by a nationalist party, narratives like this become mainstream. Followers of Modi are often called bhakts. Bhakti means devotion, so they're called his devotees, and that means they're blinded to the truth. This unquestioning mindset taught to Indians came up at Sunday's protest in Vancouver.
Washington Post, New York Times, people are not reading them. This is not getting to them. Even if they're reading them, they're like, oh, how do they know? Like, they don't believe in the sources, they don't believe in what's happening, they just believe too much in whatever the ministers are telling them.
And so what do you think needs to be done instead?
I think they need to be told and educated. I mean, you can't really do anything else about a buck than, like, you can just show them, try appeal to them, if not one, like in 100 different ways, as to how what they're supporting is just, it's the death of democracy. And at one point, if they want something democratic, they're taking it away from themselves too, for their future generations.
So, to step back for a minute, I want to explain what Modi's policies are and why they have sparked such violence. In the last few months, there are two policies that the Modi government's passed: the CAA and the NRC, Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens. To put it concisely, the CAA provides an easier route to citizenship for people coming to India from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, under the pretense that they are religious minorities escaping persecution. However, this act explicitly excludes Muslims. So when this act was passed, it was immediately seen in India as anti-secular. India is a country comprised of multiple cultures, religions, and languages, and its constitution proclaims it as a secular country, proud of its diversity. Acts like the CAA, according to protesters, go against the secular foundation of the country. It reminds me of what protester Imtiaz Popat said to us on Sunday.
So yeah, and just one question, how sort of effective do you think protests outside India are going to be? Like, what sort of message do you want to send to the people back home?
We believe in a strong secular India. India is known as one of the most pluralist countries with the most diverse religions, and that was India's pride. It was what India is all about. In every village, Sikh, Muslims, Hindus, loved each other. And now India is not about that, it's about hate. This is not our India. This is not what we believe in.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, thanks so much, Imtiaz.
Like Imtiaz says, the secular nature of the country is just being eroded by this law. The second law, the NRC, is responsible for making the 190,000 people stateless that I mentioned at the top of the piece. As you could probably have guessed, they're mostly Muslim. The NRC requires Indian residents to prove their citizenship. And a lot of Indians, especially who live near the borders, just don't have the proper documentation required to prove their citizenship. That's due to a lack of education and inefficient governance. Some people at the protest saw this proving citizenship as a sign of a potentially genocidal future.
They're not actually reading any of the international news or media. They're not interested in reading what's going on and what's bad and what's good. All they care about is supporting him. There's this video that surfaced about last week, which showed this one very poor guy, I would say, marginally a bit lower class, and it was asking him that, the prices of onions is going so high, and the economy is so down, and everything is getting so expensive. How are you going to feed your family, your kids? His response was, I will sleep hungry, my kids will sleep hungry, but we will die supporting Modi. But he does not really know what's going on. I mean, he does not want to accept that 25 people in UP are dead. He does not want to accept that detention camps are real in 2020 in a place like India. He does not even know what Hitler did back in Germany. He does not know how similar this is. He does not know how the stripping of citizenship is how it all started. And if he's supposed to strip away our citizenship, I mean, how the hell is he still elected, right?
What that protester said struck me, because laws like these are the most visible part of Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda. There are more subtle ways. My mother spoke to me about how even in family WhatsApp groups, the need to demonstrate alleged Hindu superiority has never been greater.
In social media and all, in WhatsApp, like I am part of so many groups. I'm a Hindu and I like the like Hindu religious, like I like telling stotras and so Sanskrit based things. I like that, but there is lot of content on WhatsApp where they say, see, Hinduism is so great, we are say, please forward this to as many people, which I don't want to do. Like this is all. And also there is a, in many cases it's very like blatant message where they say Hinduism is the greatest against other religions. This is not. So such messages are there, which see in earlier days when we used to practice our religions at home, we didn't have to do this where we say our religion is the greatest.
I mean, this is sort of old news at this point. Like, ask any person of Indian descent. They'll tell you family WhatsApp groups are chaotic, even at the best of times. But I completely agree with my mom. The kind of nationalistic, faux religious stuff that gets sent now is overwhelming. So with the rise of this particular kind of nationalism, who exactly is resisting? The media and institutions in India have all been silent. No Western government has condemned India. Consequently, students and international activist groups have been the ones to speak up. On Sunday, they weren't the only protesters at the Indian Consulate. There was also a group of protesters advocating for the creation of Khalistan, an independent Sikh state in northern India.
Since we have fair few international solidarity in Marxist organizations here as well, it's not just the Indian demographic.
Yeah, no, there was a speaker from, I don't remember from which nation, was here as well to kind of provide like the First Nations perspective. There was Councillor Jean Swanson was here. It's ultimately somewhat of a diverse group. There's like people with Extinction Rebellion pins as well, from like some socialist organizations too. Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be like the Khalistani organization is, I don't know whether it was more spontaneous or what, because this one seems more wide-ranging in terms of goal.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's go talk to some more people again.
So there has been a lot of violence against students, university students in India. So as my board says, that this violence is state-sanctioned violence. There's a lot of police brutality.
This interviewee went on to say that the tactics used by the Indian state are similar to any other authoritarian regime. For example, claiming any protesters were paid by the opposition and foreign actors. She said that protesting in Vancouver would show the Indian government that students all across the world do not agree with them, and that they would send a loud message. India is very proud of fighting colonialism. It's no wonder that Gandhi, an idol in Western eyes, is on every one of its currency notes. One of the protesters said he even thought India would be leading the charge against global fascism because of this history.
These people of India have a legacy of freedom. Okay. They have earned their freedom with the sacrifices of a lot of freedom fighters. And in the last century, they have shown it to the world, exemplified it to the world through leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, that how to get rid of the colonialism. They showed it how British colonialism was fought and defeated. So it's my firm belief that the people of India are again going to be the examples for the rest of the world and show it to the world how in the 21st century we are going to fight neo-Nazism.
But despite this history, Modi's intolerant India didn't come from nowhere. When I talked to my mother, she described how Hindu-Muslim tensions have been stoked like this before. In 1992, a mosque in northern India was torn down by Hindu nationalists who claimed it was built on consecrated Hindu land. The demolition triggered countrywide riots, and my mother was in India's capital, Delhi, when it happened.
In early 90s, when the Ayodhya riots were happening, I personally saw it at close quarters when I was in Delhi at that time. I was working in CDOT and I was sent to Delhi. I was working there, and we were in Chandni Chowk, and we were asked to, I think the offices were closed, or we were asked to go home early or something. I don't remember.
Right.
But we were in the taxi, and the people, the riots were to such an extent that, like, they were pelting stones, and it even hit our car, and we sped by our taxi.
So were they just throwing stones at everyone, or was it like a targeted thing?
No, it was like generally like the tensions were so this thing that people were randomly doing it on the street.
So how can riots like that happen before Modi, in a country so proud of its secular nature? Did that version of India ever exist, where all religions existed together peacefully? I don't think it did. Not just because such a utopia was impossible, but also because colonial boundaries and governance created division where there was little before. It's therefore difficult to say whether India was ever completely peaceful in terms of religion. But one thing it certainly wasn't was a Hindu state that Modi, much like Donald Trump, claims it was before the invaders arrived. India has seen a sharp rise in Islamophobia since Modi's first election, but he capitalized on sentiments that have existed for some time. The people who are protesting on Sunday in Vancouver and the students protesting in India right now may be fighting for a version of India that never existed. But regardless of what they are fighting for, right now, that fight is not being echoed anywhere, in our institutions, in our media, or anywhere else in the world. Alrighty, so we're reaching the end of the protest. There's a bunch of people talking now. I think it's gonna wrap up soon. So, Josh, just what are your impressions overall?
I mean, it was ultimately a relatively small group, but also a very outspoken group, very motivated for the cause and stuff. There was definitely a lot of tensions earlier between the Khalistani independence protesters and the anti-CAA protesters, but I guess they managed it, made it work, but the other protest group is kind of left now. But coincidentally, like, they left and now it just kind of feels like this one's just dying down.
Yeah, it's been interesting because the speakers there have been speakers from various organizations, and they've all talked about international solidarity quite a bit. So I think this is the kind of expression of that, like the Palestinian organizations, there's the Socialist Fight Back, and all that sort of stuff. So like, it really is, it speaks to how the movement against Modi has sort of been led by these organizations, not really any sort of institution.
I mean, that's also kind of just Vancouver's activist, left-leaning political community. You know, if you throw a protest speaking out about one issue, then people will just tie it to, kind of any sort of related issues with just throughout the world.
Yeah, for sure.
India is the world's biggest democracy. But if the world and Canada don't start listening, one of the world's most famous post-colonial success stories may end up being a footnote in the rise of global fascism. Hindu nationalism is complicated to understand, but I hope more people start paying attention to it.
Disability,
mental health,
ADHD and ADD,
and many, many more topics we explore and cover.
But where?
On CITR's All Access Pass, a unique and collectively run show on equity, inclusion, and creating awareness for people of all abilities in BC and around the world.
Catch us every other Wednesday afternoon from 3 to 4.
If you want more info or want to get involved, please find us on Facebook or send us an email at accessibilitycollective@citr.ca.
Discorder Magazine has been supporting local music for over 30 years. Thanks to the long-term support of the Rickshaw Theatre, Discorder lives. Your favorite bands are playing at the Rickshaw Theatre. Check out their calendar just behind the cover of Discorder Magazine or at rickshawtheatre.com.
And we're back. Thanks for listening to On the Point on CITR 101.9 FM. So now we're going on to headlines. Zubin.
Oh, yeah. So this week there was a climate protest at David Eby's office. On Tuesday, 25 members of Our Time Vancouver, UBC C350, and the UBC Social Justice Center occupied Attorney General David Eby's constituency office on West Broadway. While the protest was underway, Our Time Vancouver, UBC C350, and the UBC Social Justice Center issued a statement saying this action was taken in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en Nation, whose hereditary chiefs continue to oppose the $6.6 billion Coastal GasLink project. According to UBC C350, 3 young activists who were in Eby's office were arrested and charged with mischief. The 670-kilometer pipeline will deliver fracked natural gas from northeastern BC to an LNG Canada plant near Kitimat that has not been built yet. Earlier this month, Coastal GasLink obtained an extension on a civil injunction in BC Supreme Court against protesters who have obstructed lawfully permitted activity, and Justice Margaret Church ruled that their recourse to self-help remedies is contrary to the rule of law. Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs rejected that ruling and issued an eviction notice to Coastal GasLink on unceded traditional Wet'suwet'en territory. Credit to Charlie Smith of the Georgia Strait for this reporting.
Right, so Zachary, you have a statement as well?
I mean, I do have a statement. It kind of goes back to the hunger strike. It wasn't necessarily kind of prepared to talk about it, but...
Oh, we can talk about something else. Like, did you have something you wanted to say?
I mean, basically, like, the hunger strike, or to refer back to that hunger strike and everything, was when, basically, when Extinction Rebellion, which was another climate advocacy group who ended up, I think they occupied a different office on the North Shore. They didn't eat for, I think, 5 days because of the divestment that UBC C350 had claimed had already been kind of won way back in December. It doesn't really... And now, like, UBC C350 has kind of moved towards the Wet'suwet'en pipeline issue, which I think is, well, they're moving this, fracked water, or fracked oil over to, is it natural gas, you said?
The pipeline thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, the pipeline from Dawson Creek to Kitimat is fracked natural gas.
Okay. So I think, what I've learned is that the fracked natural gas is the process of fracking, which basically shoves a bunch of water into the ground to pull out that gas, which is trapped in basically rock and stuff, is very bad for groundwater. And basically what I've learned from other pipeline issues in the United States, that it tends to happen when there's a pipeline that goes through land that is owned by people, tends to leak a little bit sometimes, and that is not very good. And I understand why these indigenous groups are definitely up in arms about this. Causing mischief in an attorney general's office might not be the best idea, but I'm still with them, I guess.
The mischief thing?
What about the mischief thing?
I mean, we were just talking off air about how, like, olden sounding mischief is. It's like up there with, like, vagrancy. Like, it's such a weird charge to bring, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, actually, I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, it's like what they use when they can't really charge you with anything. So they're like, yeah, you're up to mischief.
Yeah.
So next up, we also have a PSA by Violet.
Yeah, so switching topics just a little bit here to talk about the coronavirus and some information I feel like the listeners in the Vancouver area might want to hear about it. So the first Canadian case of the coronavirus cropped up in Toronto on January 27th. The man affected had recently traveled to Wuhan and began to feel ill on his flight back to Toronto. He's believed to have passed the virus on to his wife, who is showing mild symptoms. As of January 28th, health officials in British Columbia confirmed that a man in his 40s tested presumptively positive, and I think now that's like a definite positive as of today, or possibly yesterday, after a business trip that he took to the Chinese city of Wuhan as well. After displaying symptoms, the man in the Vancouver area voluntarily isolated himself in his home and called a clinic. And the patient is reportedly doing well, and his family members have not displayed any symptoms. According to the Google Trends Twitter account, worldwide search interest for coronavirus symptoms had increased by 1,050% compared to the week before. And apparently, there has also been a spike in the Google search for corona beer virus in many parts of the world. But just to clear up any confusion, the two are not linked. The virus is definitely separate from the beer, and you will not get this virus from drinking the beer. Chinese authorities reported that at least 106 people have died from the novel virus in China, and that it's believed to have originated in a market in Wuhan where meat was sold alongside live animals. There has been more than 4,520 cases confirmed, with the number continuing to increase and occurring in a few countries. The coronaviruses are a large family of viruses that cause illnesses ranging from the common cold to more severe diseases such as severe acute respiratory syndrome, aka SARS, and Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. According to the World Health Organization, the new coronavirus has been named novel coronavirus as its distinction. It's the 7th coronavirus known to affect humans, and the mortality rate seems to only actually be 3 or 4%, which was definitely news to me when I was first introduced to the virus. I totally thought it was a death sentence, so I thought it was important to include that the mortality rate is actually quite low. The CDC states that the symptoms for the coronavirus may appear in as few as 2 days and as long as 14 days after exposure. Common signs of infection include fever, coughing, and breathing difficulties. In more severe cases, infection can cause pneumonia, SARS, kidney failure, and death. The World Health Organization has declared it a public health emergency
as of today.
Yeah. Oh, as of today.
Yeah, like
okay.
It happened.
In China or worldwide?
Worldwide. It's global. Okay. So, I mean, don't go into a panic, but it is like serious. Mm-hmm. So wash your hands and whatnot. Continue.
Yeah. So, UBC actually put out a statement to address kind of the community here and how it might affect us. It apparently is a low risk for Canada and Canadian travelers. And although there's been a confirmed case in BC, there's been no confirmed cases on campus in terms of UBC students, faculty, or staff as of today, January 30th. As a reminder to our community and the wider Vancouver community, the advice from health agencies on avoiding the spread of infection is to do a lot of the things that we're probably doing anyway. So washing your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If soap and water are not available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Stay home when you are sick. Definitely don't be using public transit if you're sick. Cover your cough or sneeze with a tissue, or I use the back of my elbow, and then immediately throw away the tissue in the trash. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. A really important aspect of this too, and Isa's going to touch on this after I read out a few statements, is that following the confirmed case in Toronto, there was a petition being circulated by parents in north of Toronto demanding 17 days of self-quarantine, as well as tracking students and families who had recently traveled to China. And here I'm going to read a few excerpts from a letter written by the board chair and director of education of York Region District School Board in response to the petition. Individuals who make assumptions, even with positive intentions of safety, about the risk of others, requiring or demanding quarantine can be seen as demonstrating bias and racism. At times such as this, we must come together as Canadians and avoid any hint of xenophobia, which is, in this case, can victimize our East Asian Chinese community. Situations such as these can regrettably give rise to discrimination based on perceptions, stereotypes, and hate. Isa, do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I do feel like there is a kind of almost like a mass hysteria that's going on. For me, like I am Chinese, so I've been definitely aware. Like, I don't know how much of it is like normal racism and how much of it is like coronavirus related racism. But when I'm like in public and I'm speaking Chinese to my mom on the phone, like I've gotten a lot of like looks, and it's just like not a good feeling. I've also like obviously this isn't the worst form of racism, but like I'm definitely like hyper aware. Also like you hear like a lot of comments, and it's just like generally a lot of people are advocating to completely ban travel from China, or like, and I think there is like I think there's also like a lot of people are using this as an opportunity to kind of stroke their own like xenophobia and spout like hate speech and racism, and talk about how like Chinese people eat like dogs or snakes, because like apparently they have traced it to possibly like snakes, but I don't think like this is something that we should be blaming people's cuisine for. And I also think the West should get off its like moral high ground, like its high horse of like, oh, we only eat a certain type of meat. I just think that's like complete bull. But like
the inherent hypocrisy when you say that, oh, they eat bats and dogs, they're so foreign, is like crazy. Like, how is blue cheese not weirder than any of this?
Right?
How is like fermenting something from the udder of a cow not as weird as this? Come on, guys.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but definitely like xenophobia has been going on, and I've really noticed it. And like it's also like almost like a testing to like show, like it's like revealing the racists.
Oh yeah.
Which is like an interesting experience.
I've seen some pretty offensive and racist memes floating around there, which is like really disturbing to be like following someone on Instagram who thinks it's okay to like share something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
That was really upsetting to me, especially, you know, gathering all the information for this PSA and then seeing that on my feed was like shocking to me.
And also understanding that like this virus is actively impacting real people in China, and you know, a lot of people are making it into a joke or using it to further their own racist like intentions
agendas.
Or whatnot. Yeah, like agendas. Yeah, that was the word I was thinking of. But like it's really awful because like there are people who are actively dying in China, and it's like terrifying. Like I have family there, and like I'm very concerned. Like this is a very real reality for me, and so to have people like use this opportunity to like make more racist jokes is just like the worst.
I think it came at a really unfortunate time with the new year as well. And I do want to stress that I don't think it should be thought of as a Chinese disease. I just think that's a really problematic narrative that's happening as well.
So like the politicization of like epidemics, like when SARS was happening, everyone blamed China for not dealing with it. And like when the coronavirus is happening, everyone is like saying, oh, China, why aren't you locking your borders? Like public health emergencies shouldn't be political. And like they should be treated as like a global thing. And like the fact that we're seeing racism against Chinese people how is it in any way their fault? I will never know. Because like I don't think anyone like spreads disease like that. Like there was a conspiracy theory going around that like someone got the virus from Canada from Winnipeg and went all the way to China to like implant it, which is, I just don't know how you'd believe anything like that. Like Chinese people aren't involved with this in any way.
Hold on, I'm a little confused. You say that someone made a conspiracy that originated in Winnipeg and then they brought it to China?
Yeah, so the conspiracy theory was there was, I believe, a person of Chinese origin who was removed from the Winnipeg disease lab. I think that's where the disease lab is in Canada. And that was months ago. And the conspiracy theory goes that they took a virus from the lab, went all the way to Wuhan, implanted it, and for some like big Canadian psyop sort of thing. It's really weird in its racism, but yeah.
The first thing that comes to my mind when I hear this is like the worst example of forced Canadian content I've ever heard. But I mean, no conspiracy theories. I remember seeing an article about coronavirus, and then I did the foolish thing of accidentally looking in the comments, and people were saying, "Oh, it's invented by the government of China and such." And
yeah, that's
not true.
Like, I don't think the government of China is like really actively trying to invent a virus to kill its own people. Like, that doesn't really check out.
The damage to their own economy and people would be massive, and I think you'd have to be very, very, very out of your mind.
Conspiracy theories, not good, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a totalitarian government with other means to control their population.
Oh!
In my own opinion.
Moving on.
Is there like a siren effect that we can
Speaking
do?
of like conspiracy and like
the
the
buzzer?
paranormal, supernatural, whatever, I'm trying to make a transition. So we've been talking local news as usual, and now we're going to have a experimental piece by our beloved friend and mentor, Alex DeBoer. She made me say that. Put together a nonfiction story about a Lower Mainland paranormal investigator. Daryl Pearson is the founder of the not-for-profit organization North Paranormal Investigations, and the group works to help people who are experiencing paranormal events and don't know what to do about it. So let's take a listen to this delightful tale.
We miss you, Alex.
It can be glass, it can be plastic, it can be wood. People make it out of many things. It can be numbers and letters on a table. In the classical version of it, it's just a compressed piece of plywood with numbers and letters, yes and no, and goodbye at the bottom. Some type of plastic planchette or something that people can put their fingers on, and they ask questions, and hopefully it'll answer by going from yes to no, or letter by letter by letter, or number by number, spell out a date, time, a letter, a name, etc., stuff like that. Yes, I used a Ouija board. I mean, honestly, nowadays somebody will tell me, "Oh, that was bad," and I'll say, "No, it was a piece of wood with a plastic planchette." It wasn't the board that was the problem, it's what I tried to do with it that was the problem. I could operate the board personally by myself. Nobody else had to be with me. One-handed. I asked a lot of questions about my life in general, where I was going to go, if I was going to meet somebody, what was going to happen, was I going to get what I needed the next day. Something came through the board that went by the name of Zoe. Yes, I remember the name rather vividly. Whatever Zoe was, it was agreeing with things, prompting yeses and nos to my questions that I guess I was kind of following with, which got me deeper and deeper into other problems that I had already gotten myself into. At the time, people tell me, well, what was the problem? And I said, probably the amount of things that I was taking and doing and using at the time. When I cleaned up, I went into my first recovery house. I still had the board. Somebody said, you have to get rid of the board. I said, okay. So I basically broke it up and I threw it out. And the night that I did, actually the afternoon, I had a nap. I had a dream. Now, in that dream, everybody has a typical interpretation of what they see as far as the gentleman down in the below goes, okay? Whether it's the horn thing or anything else. Everybody has their own interpretation. Now, again, it was a dream. He appeared very upset, very angry, basically melted away, and I was replaced by the flame of a candle. It was a really unique experience for me because when I woke up from it, I remembered it. I was a little bit panicked. I told the gentleman about it. He says, go for a walk. So I went for the walk, and when I was walking through an area of forest not far from the house, everything looked exceedingly vivid. there was the trees, the bark, the leaves, the sounds. Everything was way beyond what it should have been. I can't explain it, except for some people have looked at me since, heard the story and said, well, you had a spiritual awakening. Yeah, okay. I didn't really understand that at the time, but it was just having that experience, having that vividness. This was a point where I reached where I knew something was there that was a little bit slicker than me. It was something that kind of drove me to stay clean and sober and move on with my life. My name's Daryl Pearson. I'm the founder of Northern Paranormal Investigations. We're a paranormal investigation group that investigates, evaluates, and hopefully explains reported occurrences of paranormal activity. I don't picture it as a religion. I picture it's a belief to a point. I used to be a welder fabricator. I guess I still am. I actually work in a welding office now. That's what I do 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. So that allows me to get 3 days off, which allows me to do everything else I have to do paranormal-wise and family-wise and everything else. MPI was officially founded, I do believe, the beginning of 2010, so the end of 2009, 2010. We are 100% nonprofit. Nobody within the group gets paid any monies in any way, shape, or form, never. And it would be very bad for anybody to ask any person experiencing paranormal events in their house and that is scared to ask them for money for their fears. I guess my first thought, way back when I first started out, was I really don't know what to expect, but I know there's something else out there. Hi, you wouldn't believe this, but okay, can you please tell us more about what you're experiencing? I went to my first investigation. I was sitting on a love seat. A guy had like one of those point laser temperature things, and I said, it's getting cold beside me. And when he pointed the laser at the seat sitting beside me, the temperature dropped 15 degrees C within about 35, maybe 40 seconds. Just don't. And I could put my hand in what appeared to be the cold shape of a person sitting right beside me, but there was nobody there. I asked them to move. The temperature went back up. And I kind of went, wow, that's really cool. I want to find out. And it becomes a little bit exciting because you're catching something that shouldn't exist. By all known laws of science, it shouldn't exist. So what is it? I think the alternative for me would have been just to live a basic life and move on, but I don't know where I would have been without it. It is taxing, believe you me. I mean, I have come to a point at certain times where I've been depressed, and I felt like I just wanted to give it up and walk away from it. Maybe my goal was to help people from a certain point of view that other people can't, but at the same time there's an excitement about it, and it keeps drawing you back and drawing you back and drawing you back and back and back and back and back and back.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you for listening. This is CITR 101.9 FM. Tune in next week for more undercover current affairs.